Hi, I'm Christopher Annadale. I've tracked down some of my former students to ask, is there life after philosophy? Welcome to Life After Philosophy. My guest today is Alex Wakaluk. He is a 2017 graduate of Mount St. Mary's University with a double major in philosophy and computer science. He works now as a software engineer in the mortgage industry, and he lives in Frederick, Maryland. Alex, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
I'm interested in knowing just how your academic work in philosophy and in computer science has led you to the position you have now as a software engineer, as someone who builds software and does what we might just very broadly call coding, or people from outside the
Mhm.
industry. What's the path been like for you? And looking back now, how has the education you got played a role in where you've gotten to?
It's it's interesting because ever since high school, I sort of knew that I was going to be a software engineer. Like that was always the path that I had in mind. And when I got to the Mount, really enjoyed my comp sci classes. But by sophomore year, I kind of got the itch to do something that I wasn't going to have the chance to do ever again. And I was looking at all the core classes I was taking, and the ones that really stuck out to me were the philosophy classes. Like those were the ones that I found the most interesting. And I was talking to my roommate Chris at the time, and I was telling him of my conundrum, and he told me, I said, I think I'm going to get a minor in philosophy just because I find it interesting. It'd be fun to do. And he said, nope, minors are useless. You're going to get a major. And he sent me off to Dr. Buck's office, and that was that was the push that I needed to get the major. It
Oh,
was
wow. That's
yeah.
great.
And I had one goal. I said not to make a fool of myself throughout getting a philosophy degree because it's very much out of my comfort zone. But I wish I had made a fool of myself more in college in those classes. But would have learned. I think that's a better outlook to have. But after that junior year, I got what's called the NSSP scholarship, National Security Scholars Program scholarship, and
Mhm.
got placed with a defense contractor as for an internship. And then after I graduated, Raytheon offered me a job, and I stayed with them for a couple of years, then moved over to a smaller defense contractor. I quickly realized that defense contracting was not for me. I did not like it was very stressful, did not want to be there. Um, then
It was a very high pressure environment.
it's high pressure. There's a lot that goes into it. Like it's defense contracting is not a good return on investment for the taxpayer. It's just
Okay.
not.
We'll leave it at that.
We'll leave it at that. And then there's some other stuff I had to go through polygraphs, which were very stressful for me, and I didn't like doing them, so I just got out of there. Started dating my girlfriend last year, and she told me, "You're miserable. You need to leave." And that's when I left for Cardinal Financial, and now I work on their loan origination software. Um,
Fantastic.
yeah.
So you seem happier and less stressed then. Just you
Yes,
found
much.
your comfort level.
I found my comfort level. Yeah, it's a good environment. Cardinal Financial has a really good process for coding, and I've enjoyed my time here. I've been here for about a year and a half now. So yeah.
That's great. That's great. Now, let me just go back because you said you wished you'd made a fool of yourself a bit more. You mean taken more risks in terms of what you'd been willing to say or to
Yeah.
do?
Yeah, I mean, you've had me in a couple classes, and I think you noticed I was a little bit quiet some of those classes. And looking back, I wish I had just asked the dumb questions more often. Let's put it that way. Because that's something it took me a while to learn in my career as a software engineer. And like past couple years, past three years, just ask the dumb questions right up front because you're not gonna, if you don't do that, you're not gonna be able to ask the smart questions later.
That's a really good way of putting it. I like that. I like that expression. That's that sort of silence where you play it safe does
Mhm.
take a lot of success off the table. I suppose that that's something you've seen in your life in the workplace too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you see connections between your work in philosophy and your work in computer science? That's not a combination that we see all the time, but we could certainly think there are patterns of thought. There's logic. A friend of mine from graduate school told me that really programming is just Boolean logic plus lots and lots of syntax, just learning the
Yeah.
rules of a programming language. What have been the bridges there?
Would have been the bridges there. Yeah, logic, I would say, is the one that is most tangible. Like you can point to the most tangible usages from tangible bridges from philosophy to computer science. It's like if I'm writing code and there's an if else statement, I've got to make sure that and I'm falling into an if block
Hmm.
when I'm not supposed to be. I've got to make sure that the premises are only incorporating the situations that I want them to. So that's pretty much that's just logic, applied logic, pretty much.
Yeah.
And then there's, if I'm going through a data set and I got to pull out specifics, I need to make sure that the criteria that I'm looking for is only applying to the data that I wanted. Like that's all just logic in and of itself. But I think it goes beyond that as well, though. Like
Hmm.
if I'm sitting in a room with an end user and they are describing to me a bug that they're encountering, I have to be able to, I've got to be able to understand the game that they're sort of playing. They're playing a very different game than me. I'm very technical. I want technical specs, but I've got to be able to understand that they're coming at it from just a usage perspective.
Would you say you have to have a working mental model of how the client is thinking about the task?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got to take that and I've got to translate it into a technical spec. That's what you do in the classroom, right? Like you take two philosophers and you try to reconcile what they're saying. You do that with essays, you do that with what other students are saying. It's it's very similar. Is it philosophy? No, but it's very much the same tools.
That's interesting. I've for all of the presence that coding has had in the culture the past decade or so as a kind of second career of last resort for people whose coal mine or steel mill has been shut down. Coding seems to be really a very, I'm sorry, software generation seems to be a very specialized skill that requires a fair amount of organization and familiarity with the building and testing of models, but also a fair amount of creativity. This is just an observation I've heard other people make
Mhm.
that you have to think in a certain way that maybe logic stimulates you to think in as well, but that it's not a sort of universal skill that anybody can pick up to a functional level. What are your thoughts on that?
I think I think it's a lot like I think it's a lot like trying to pick up a new language, right? The younger you are, the sort of easier it is to do. Um, because if I encounter a very difficult problem in my work, the path to get it solved is not always directly A to B.
Hmm.
And if I can do the path from A to B to get it working, that path is not always the most efficient path. And so you have to be able to think outside the box, use some of the tools and tricks from any logic class that you take
Right.
to get your program to be more functional.
That's interesting because I've heard of the term of elegance in coding. Some code is elegant and some is not, and that's not always a matter of its being shorter or more compact or more efficient, but that it solves a problem in maybe say an unexpected way or in a way that creates fewer potential problems for any kind of later development or expansion of the code. Am I speaking in a way that seems to fit with your experience?
We have a saying, um, well, not we, the person I used to work for had a saying. He said, I hate clever code because
Oh.
clever code is nearly impossible to maintain. Because if you come up with a solution that is clever, a lot of time it's difficult to sort of reverse engineer to understand how to fix a problem.
Hmm.
So when you say elegant code, what I hear elegant as in you can look at it and just understand how it works. Like you don't need to spend 10, 15 minutes to understand 10 lines of code. Like you're just like, oh, look at it. It flows nicely and you move on from there.
That does seem to have something else in common with teaching as well, that the thinking about the nature of the audience or the future audience, people who will be reading and trying to decipher your code later. You don't write some esoteric document that will be functional but only interpretable by you. Your whole job is to create something for the ages, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak.
Yeah.
Have you found software engineering to be a kind of creative outlet, or is it more kind of work and you look for your creative outlet elsewhere?
At first it was definitely creative. Now as I've sort of been at it for 7 years, it's more work.
Hmm.
That being said, uh, there are some tasks where you just get to sink your teeth in, and then it's just, you just get into a state of flow, and it just flow. The code just flows out of you, and it's very enjoyable. But that happens once or twice a year.
Is there a way that you think that your life and career path has been changed by that decision prompted by your roommate to pursue not just a minor but a major in philosophy?
Yes, and I don't necessarily have something tangible to say. Like I wouldn't be doing X if not for philosophy, but I don't think I would have been as unhappy with my previous job. I think I would have just sort of accepted it and sort of moved on with my life and gritted my teeth for as long as I could. If I hadn't been looking for a better way to flourish.
Mhm.
Um, that being said, there's also, I went to Catholic school in high school, and I the religion courses. In my opinion, they weren't the best. It was a lot of Baltimore Catechism, just response and answer, sort of dogmatic. Just this is what it is. This is what to believe.
Mhm.
And what philosophy gave me was to approach my faith in sort of a naturalistic way, if that makes sense.
That makes sense to me. It resonates with me. One of the things I've said to someone else recently is that people, I think, perhaps this is an American trait, tend to think of religion as dogma, as the thing to believe. Take the book off the shelf, open the book, you discover what the doctrine is, and you just believe the doctrine somehow, or you don't, in which case you depart from the religion. But that the philosophical tradition, certainly at a Catholic school like the Mount, or the
Mm-hmm.
whole idea of being a Catholic philosopher studying philosophy in that tradition, is that there's this intellectual, naturalistic side to things, that one can understand things independently of any dogmatic authority or acceptance of a tradition. So that what you've said fits in with my thoughts on that line.
Yeah, it's weird because in high school, like I don't want to say I had a crisis of faith because I didn't, but in high school, I accepted religion more. It's the Catholic faith more on like this is just part of my culture. This is just part of how he was raised, and like I can't abandon it because it's a part of me. And then once I got into the philosophy classes at the Mount and deeper into it, I still remember taking Dr. Machulet's Seven Deadly Sins course. Like
Yeah, it's a good course.
that is a fantastic. And like it gave me a way to approach religion, the Catholic faith outside of that,
Mhm.
which made it the best way I can describe it is gave me a firmer footing.
Yeah, that makes great sense. I've heard other people say things that seem to fit along those same lines. Thank you. One of the things we sometimes talk about in the philosophy curriculum is personal formation. It's easy to sometimes pull out the skills of argumentation or of critical reasoning or even of logical analysis, proof testing and system building. But that part of what a philosophy education ought to do in addition is to give people an understanding of human nature and virtue, to give them a way of reasoning and thinking about what it means to be a human being at the natural level and to flourish, to be happy, and to recognize, as you've suggested, happened to you, when they're not flourishing and need to make a change. Were there some elements of personal formation that you can see now looking back at your own philosophy education and subsequent years?
One of the yes, one of the things, yeah, I mentioned the Seven Deadly Sins course from Dr. Machulet, and one of the things I take from that course, and I don't know if this is inherent in the Seven Deadly Sins or anything like that, but one of the things I took from it um is the relationship between the body and the mind.
Hmm.
There was I apologize for the pause, but I'm trying to.
Take your time.
One of the things I noticed is that when that was out of whack, the focusing more on the mind versus and forgetting about the body, what would happen is that you would fall into sort of these ruts of neglecting one over the other. For me personally, sometimes it became a problem with gluttony. And there was a situation where I had to recognize that I couldn't just sit around and watch movies all day, even though I love doing that, because it would turn into not eating for the enjoyment of it, but eating for the just for the sake, for the act of doing it.
Yeah.
And recognizing that there's a relationship between keeping your mind healthy and your body healthy, like that sort of helped me along my journey. I'm not sure if that is answering your question, but
I think
it's
that's great. I think that's a great answer. I sometimes end up telling my freshmen that the philosophy that I'm teaching them, at least at the initial stages, it feels as much like I'm being a life coach as what they might recognize as a life coach as actually being doing some sort of abstract, technical, wise man philosophy.
yeah, yeah, it's weird. You start to sit down and you start like I the one book that I sort of keep coming back to from my philosophy, from my time doing philosophy at the Mount, is the Seven Deadly Sins today. And you just sort of start to recognize little ways to improve your life based off of the things they talk about. Like,
Mhm.
if there's a yeah, never mind. I think that's the best way to sum that up.
I think that's fine. The Seven Deadly Sins today, that's a book that goes back some time because I think my wife has a copy of that book from a course that she took in college. This would have been when we were both in school back in the 90s.
Mhm.
I've not read it, but I think it's been on our shelf at home. I think in light of what you said, I need to take it down and give it a close look. Is it a book you'd recommend to people who are interested?
I would recommend that book to pretty much everybody. Uh, and whether or not you're philosophical or religious, I think it says a lot about how to just to live a healthy life.
That's great. Thank you. I will look into that. The Seven Deadly Sins today. I forget who
Mhm.
the author is, but I'll look that up.
I think it's Henry Fairley.
Henry Fairley. Okay,
Yeah.
that does ring a bell now. Thanks very much. That's the first book recommendation I've gotten from someone on the podcast. I'm very grateful for that.
I'll just thank Dr. Matchlet. He introduced it to me.
I will. I will. His office is right next door to mine. I'll go over as soon as I have a chance. Let me ask you the question of the show, which is there any advice that you would give to a student who's in the situation that you were in some years ago, 8, 9 years ago, thinking about minoring or majoring in philosophy, but a little bit reluctant to do it? Is there anything that you could say either from your school experience or from your life experience since then that you think might be relevant to the kind of decisions that they're trying to make now?
What I would say is that if you have a plan for what you want to do after graduation and you're thinking about adding a philosophy degree to that, philosophy is going to supplement and color everything you do in more ways than you will realize. That's what I found with my life.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that, Alex. I'm very grateful to you, and I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to appear on the show with us right now. My guest today has been Alex Wakaluk, a software engineer who lives in Frederick, Maryland, and a 2017 philosophy and computer science double major at the Mount. Thanks again, Alex.
Thanks for having me.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Life After Philosophy. If you enjoyed the podcast, please rate it 5 stars and share this episode with a friend. I appreciate your support.